Hi, my name is Santiago Restrepo and I'm the founder of consumergoodsanalytics.com, and I'm very excited to be here in the Tableau Customer Conference to talk about how to leverage Tableau for consumer goods and retail analytics. The following is the content of my presentation. First, I'm going to talk a little bit about myself. Then I'm going to provide an overview of what a consumer segmentation schema is, which is a key ingredient in a lot of the analytics case studies for the retail industry and consumer goods industry. And I'm going to showcase two case studies using a consumer segmentation schema. One of them is going to be around store potential and performance, and the other one is around store site selection. Then we're going to see a little bit about market basket analysis and how it's implemented and what insights can come out of it. I'm going to show a few key visualizations that are specific to consumer goods that I found very helpful in my past experiences. And at the end, I'm going to talk a little bit about business intelligence and analytics for consumer goods, and also a little bit more about my website, consumergoodsanalytics.com. So let's start with a little introduction about my personal background. I am from Colombia, South America, and Colombia has been a country that has not received very good news all around the world. My home country is Medellin. It used to be the drug capital of the world, but both Colombia and Medellin have improved tremendously in the last 5 or 10 years. To the right, you see the rise of the stock market. It's been doing great in the last few years. You've seen the rise in GDP per capita the last few years. And a lot of economists are classifying Colombia as one of the future potential big economies in the world, next to countries like Turkey and South Africa and some other countries. So I came to the US about 12 years ago. I did my MBA at Purdue University, and I was lucky enough to be there when Drew Brees was our quarterback, and we won the Big Ten, and it was a lot of fun. I worked for Whirlpool Corporation for about 9 years, and there I learned a lot about business intelligence and analytics in the consumer goods area. And then I moved to Hanes Brands, where I was the director of business intelligence and analytics, supporting the marketing and sales organization. So as you can see, those two companies are great consumer goods companies, but they're not consumer packaged goods companies. And I'm going to talk a little bit more about the difference in the next few slides. Recently, about 2 months ago, I moved to a consulting company, and I'm part of a division in that consulting company that provides advanced analytics solutions as a service to optimize price and assortment and promotion and a lot of the marketing drivers. And I also founded my website that's called consumergoodsanalytics.com. Is my hobby. And all the information that I share on my website and the knowledge is from my previous experience. I just want to clarify that it does not come from my current consulting employer. This is my family. It's basically my wife and I and my dog. We don't have any kids. We love the outdoors. We love to travel around, and I also love sports. I play a lot of soccer, a lot of golf, and we just enjoy the outdoors and enjoy traveling around the world. And so this is basically the difference between the consumer packaged goods companies in terms of business intelligence and analytics and the durable goods companies. So the consumer packaged goods companies, the Procter & Gamble's of the world, the Krafts, the Cokes, all those companies are very fortunate because they have Nielsen and IRI, which provide great information. They have information for point of sale, consumer panel, other causal data. They have tools and systems that facilitate the analysis of marketing and sales analytics. Unfortunately, for the durable goods companies like Whirlpool, like Hanes brands, there is not a company like Nielsen or RAI that merges all that information together with the right analytics or the right tools. So a lot of that same data exists by different vendors, but it's very hard to integrate. But it can be done, and that's basically what I've done throughout my career, is being able to merge that information from a lot of the different providers in the durable goods sector and be able to implement similar methodologies and processes and systems to what the consumer packaged good companies are able to implement. So now we're going to talk about what a consumer segmentation schema is and why it's so important to develop a lot of the analytics that are applied in the consumer goods industry. So a consumer segmentation schema is a system that classifies each U.S. household into one of multiple segments. Here we're seeing a segmentation schema that has around 170 segments, and we know exactly how many households belong to each of the segments, as well as many demographic characteristics and behaviors of each of those specific segments. So let's take a look here at segment 14, which they're middle age without children, they're urban, and we can see the index on each of the demographic characteristics, and we can also see what are the main behaviors of that specific segment. So we can see where are they located, what are the main zip codes in the US, and we can also see what are the different demographics and lifestyles. So that specific segment, for example, indexes high on being a member of an art association, and they index high on doing sports and fitness, yoga. So there's a lot of information about each of those segments. They index high, for example, on drinking Irish whiskey, and they index low, for example, on using cigarettes that have menthol, for example. Let's look at other examples. Let's look at one of the segments here in the right side, which are the ones that are least affluent. Let's look, for example, at this segment 141, and we see that they're middle-aged with children, renters, low income, highly indexed to be Black or African American. And we can also see where that specific segment is located and what are the key characteristics. So we see what are the main zip codes and the low zip codes for that specific segment, and we can also see again what are the different things that they do. So sports and fitness, they play a lot of basketball, they don't play a lot of golf or own their snow skis. For example, they index high on using men's sweats, but they index low on using men's swimsuits. So we can see a lot of the different characteristics for each of these specific segments. So now we're going to look at the specific segments and where they're located. And as an example, we're going to look at New York City, but I want to give you a caution here that the next map that you're going to see has a lot of pie charts, and pie charts are not the best way to represent information visually, but I have not been able to find another way that's better. If you have suggestions, I'd love to hear them. Please let me know. But I think pie charts do a decent job in representing what I want to show in the next visualization and example. So here is the New York City area, and we have one pie chart for every block group, and every pie chart represents the number of consumers that belong to each of the segments. So let's clean this up a little bit and just select the top segments in the New York City area. We don't need to see 172 slices per pie chart. If we just look at the top pie charts, we see that around the Central Park area, which is the nicest, one of the nicest area in New York, the main segment is this blue segment that's called segment 46. Let's look at who they are and what they like doing. So that segment 46, they're middle-aged, renters, they're affluent, they index high on being Asian. And let's look at an entertainment and leisure perspective, what they like doing. So they like attending the regular season of the NBA. They don't follow a lot of NASCAR. So those are some of the characteristics that are important for this segment. In the banking area, they have saving accounts, and they index pretty low on having non-interest bearing checking accounts at a credit union. And there's a lot of different characteristics about this segment. Let's take a look, for example, at their media preference. Say the print media preference. So we see, for example, the magazines that they read. They read the New Yorker, but they don't read TV Guide or Reader's Digest and so forth. So from what we know about these segments and these young people living in New York, I feel it's all pretty accurate information. Now let's look at another top segment in New York, and let's look at the area towards the north, which is not the nicest part of town, and the main segment there seems to be the yellow one, which is segment 146. Let's see who they are and what they like doing. So segment 146, they're older, without children, renters, have low income, and they index pretty high on being Hispanic and African American. And let's see, for example, in the media side, what they like doing. So they index pretty high on reading Johnson Publishing. They index low on reading magazines that talk about intermedia outdoor group. Let's look at newspapers. They index pretty low on reading the New York Times. So that from a print media perspective. Let's look at their lifestyle characteristics. And so, for example, they index very high on being members of a church board, and they index low on being members of an art association for a museum or symphony. So from what we know and what we understand of these segments that live in the northern part of New York, it seems pretty accurate information to who they are and what behaviors and they have. So now let's take a look at different zip codes, and there's a zip code that we're all very familiar with, which is the zip code 90210, which is Beverly Hills. And what we envision in that zip code is people that are very wealthy, and this is what we're seeing here. Most of the top segments are here in the top side of the chart, which are the segments from number 2 to number 48, and we see that they're affluent and high income, and that's pretty accurate to what we know of the Beverly Hills zip code. Now, if we're familiar with Beverly Hills, we also know that in the southeastern part, it's not as nice, and the people that live around that area are not as affluent, and that's what the information is reflecting for us. So that's another proof that the consumer segmentation schemas are very precise in describing who the segments are and where exactly they live and how to reach them. We're going to show some other great examples on how to leverage that information. So as a first example, we're going to look at a store potential and performance analysis using a consumer segmentation schema. And the first step in the process is developing or getting a profile for a specific product or behavior. So we're going to do this analysis for a specific product, which is a consumer electronics product designed for a tech-savvy consumer. It's a prestige brand and it's an upscale product. So you can imagine what product I'm talking about, but I'm not going to disclose the exact brand or the exact product. But for the purpose of this case, the information I'm providing here is good enough. So basically, the index shows the propensity of each of the segments to buy that specific product. So we see that the number one segment here is segment 101, which are middle income urban younger renters with and without children. And they are 9 times as likely as the average US household to purchase that specific product. But there's not everybody is young. Other people, some that are middle aged, like segment 36, they're also indexed pretty high on that specific product. And there are other segments that index pretty low on that specific product. There are segments that have an index of 0, so it's very unlikely that they purchase that specific product. So the consumer profile is a key ingredient, and it's a starting point to developing a lot of the consumer segmentation schema analysis. So the next important concept is the trade area. So basically here we have 3 different stores, and we want to determine what is the trade area for each of them. So the first thing that we want to do is look at how many people live around each of the stores. So for example, this store here in the middle of Manhattan is a pretty urban store. Within 5 miles there's about 1 million households. This store over here is like a median urbanicity store. There's around 500,000 households. This one here is more rural. There's only 75,000 households. So based on the density of the population and how many households live in a store, we're going to use a different radius to capture the consumers that live around that specific store. Now, using Tableau, we can see the trade area for a few stores, but if we have hundreds of thousands of stores, we're going to need to use another tool that's called a GIS tool, or Geographical Information Systems. The queries or the analysis required to do trade area analysis is very complex. So Tableau is not going to be able to handle that for a lot of stores. We have some recommendations of GIS tools in our website, but you're going to need to require one of those if you want to do this at mass scale for a lot of different stores. So now let's see how it actually works. So basically, after you look at the population or households within a certain radius, we did it in this case for 5 miles, we see the big distribution of population for those specific stores, and we can do a quartile analysis. So for example, the stores that have a low population, the ones that have 1,000 or 2,000 households around them, we want to use a larger radius, so 15 miles in this case. But in the other side of the spectrum, there's stores that are pretty urban, which have 500,000 or 1 million households around them. We want to use a smaller trade area. In this case, we're only going to use 3 miles. And we also have a 5 miles and 10 mile radius for the stores in between. So that's how we're able to calculate the trade areas, and that's how we're going to focus on the specific customers that live around each of the stores. So let's see at how it actually looks in a map. So here's the New York City area again, and we want to see at the customers within 5 miles of the 3 sample stores that we looked at before. So here they are. We see the store in downtown Manhattan and all the customers that live around there, and then the other stores and all the customers that live around them. So we can see the exact store trade area composition and which types of customers live around each of the stores, which very likely are going to be the customers that visit the stores. And by doing that, we can compare those customers to the product profile and do a lot of great analytics. So if we wanted to look at like a 3 mile radius, we can do that here as well. and we can see that the composition actually changes. So we can do it for different radiuses, but again, Tableau is going to be great for a few stores. If you have hundreds of stores or thousands, you're going to need a GIS tool in order to perform the analysis. The query is just too complex for Tableau to be able to perform. So now let's look at the explanation on how to correlate and index each of the stores. So here we have the product index that we saw a few slides ago, and we saw that in that case that segment 101 indexed pretty high on that specific product. And we also have the number of people that live around each of those stores. So if we sort the product index from the highest to the lowest, then we can start seeing relationships within each of the stores. So for example, in this case, store 801, most of the customers belong to segments that index pretty high on purchasing that specific consumer electronics product. So this store over here is going to have a high index, or it's going to be a better store for that specific product. The store in the middle is pretty evened out. We see that some of the customers are here on the segments that index pretty high on that product, but there's also a lot of households that index pretty low on that specific product. So this store actually has an index of about 100. It's about the average US store for that specific product. While the store in the bottom, store 918, we see that most of the customers that are around that store are indexed pretty low on that specific consumer electronics product. So that specific store is not going to be very good for that specific product. So that's how the logic works. A different way to visualize the information is in a scatter plot. So we can see the index of each of the segment on the product, and also the number of customers that lived around the store. So we can see that this store, the first one in the top in the previous slide, has a positive correlation, so it would index high. The second one was the one that was pretty evenly distributed, so it's going to index about 100, while this one has a negative correlation, so it's going to index pretty low. So that's how the logic works. The calculation is a weighted average, but this is how you're able to determine visually if a store is a good fit with a specific product behavior. Now we can actually look at each individual zip code, and because we know each zip code, what households belong to what segment, we can use exactly the same calculation to see which are the best zip codes for that specific product. So here we see the whole US, and we see the zip code index. So if we want to just look at the zip codes that are really good for that specific product, we can scroll up and see where they are, and where do we want to focus if we want to do special campaigns or special actions with those specific customers. And we can actually zoom in to one of the specific areas. So for example, this is the area around Minneapolis. We can see by zip code around Minneapolis what are the best areas for that specific product, and which areas are not that good for it as well. So now we want to do an analysis at a specific market level with all the stores. So here we have the area around Boston and New York. We have specific stores, and we see the index of the stores, and we already saw how to calculate that specific index. And we also have the index of the zip code. And what we see is that the index of the store is similar to the index around the zip codes of it. It makes all the sense, but it's very good to see it visually and make sure that we're not making mistakes in the calculations. So this store over here in downtown Manhattan has an index of 140, pretty good store for a consumer electronics product like the one we're describing. But when we start looking at other stores, this one has an index of 65, this one has an index of 68, and we see that the zip codes around the store also index pretty low, so it makes a lot of sense that those stores are not going to be really good for the specific product that we are looking at. So now we're going to look at not only the potential of each of the stores, but we're also going to look at the performance. So here we have all the stores located in a scatter plot, and we have the store potential, which we just saw how to get to. But if we get the point of sale data for each of those stores on that specific consumer electronics product, we can also calculate a performance index, which is actually how the store is performing in terms of sales. The way to calculate this performance index, there are different methodologies, but a common one is looking at the store's ACV, or all commodity volume, which is the total dollar amount for the store for all goods. So you basically do a ratio of the store and the ACV for all the average, and then for the specific stores, and then do an index, and that's how you get to this performance index. So basically we can classify the stores into 4 different quadrants. So the ones that are here in the top right are the ones that are doing great from a point of sale perspective, but also are great from a potential perspective. The ones that are here in the left are great stores from a product potential perspective, but from a POS perspective, they're not doing that well. Maybe we don't have the product assorted in those stores as much, or we haven't been doing that many promotions in those stores. So the stores are great for the product, but they have not been performing that well. The ones here in the bottom right are the ones that we call maintain, which are basically they're doing great, but they're not going to grow a lot more. So if you want to invest additional dollars for marketing or displays, you don't want to place them here. And the ones here in red are the stores that are not doing well, and no matter how much money you spend on them, you're not going to improve their performance. So those stores you just want to leave as they are, maybe find other products that meet the needs of the consumers better, but you don't want to focus a lot of efforts on those specific stores. And then we can actually see it in a map. If I just want to look at the Innovate stores in the top right quadrant, I can see exactly where they are. There's a lot of them around the New York and Boston area, a lot of them around Chicago. If I want to look at where my specific invest stores are, then I can also select them and see where they're located in the map. There's a lot of them around Seattle, around LA. So that's how you can determine a potential and performance strategy or a location strategy for your stores. If you want to invest marketing dollars, place vignettes, do more advertising, do promotions, you want to focus in these stores that have a high potential and the ones that are doing well or have the potential to do really well. You don't want to do it here where the stores are not the best ones for that specific product. And using a consumer segmentation schema, you can actually do an optimized media buy for that specific product. So because the segmentation schema has all the information on media viewership, you can calculate indexes for that specific consumer electronics product on a cable TV or programs or magazine or any of the specific behaviors. So for example, we see that the consumers that are more likely to purchase that consumer electronics product, they index pretty high, or they have a pretty good correlation with watching MTV and Comedy Central and E! Entertainment and Bravo and ESPN, but they don't do well with a Hallmark Channel and SoapNet and Lifetime and those specific channels. So if you wanted to do like a media campaign, this is an excellent way to see which are the best TV channels. And you can actually go down to the specific programs. So you can see that the ones that have the best correlation are like ESPN Sports Center and Jersey Shores, Comedy Central, Tosh. The ones that don't do well at all are the Andy Griffith Show and the Hallmark Hall of Fame and so forth. And you can actually do the same for magazines as well. The best magazines that have the best correlation with this specific product are US Weekly and Cosmopolitan and People. The ones that don't do well at all are Gardening and Reader's Digest and TV Guide. So we can see the power of the consumer segmentation schema, tying a specific product profile both to specific stores but also to media. So it's a very, very powerful way to optimize your consumer insights and your analytics. So now we're going to look at another case study for site selection, which is basically where to open a new store. So we're going to be using the same product profile that we used before for that consumer electronics product, but right now we are assuming that these are all the stores that we have in the US where we focus on selling that specific product, but we want to open a new store and we want to determine what is the best location for that specific store. So each of the black dots is one of the stores and where they're located, and we see the index for each of the markets. So we see that, for example, New York is a great market for that specific consumer electronics product. San Francisco is another great market. This one here, which is Albany, Georgia, is not a great market for it. So this is a great way to visualize the best potential areas across markets in the whole US to open new stores, but we also need to take into account the number of stores that are already opened. So the next step in the process is getting the number of customers in each of the markets, and we also have the number of stores in each of the markets, and then we calculate the ratio of consumers per store. And the number of customers, the way to get to that is basically we know the index of a specific market. So for example here, Boston has an index of 130, so we know it has 30% more customers than the average US. And we know the number of customers in the whole US, and from the segmentation schema provider we can see the penetration of that specific consumer electronic products. That way we can get the number of potential customers for that specific product in each of the specific markets. So what we want to do is basically sort by the number of consumers per store, and we see that Sacramento has the highest number of consumers per store. It has about 236,000 customers. It only has one store, so the ratio of consumers per store is the highest one. So if we wanted to open a store in a current market, the best place to do it would be Sacramento. Now, for the purpose of this study, we're actually going to be looking at only new markets, because let's say we made a strategic decision that we want to open new markets where we are currently not present. So we just want to filter for the markets that don't have any stores. And when we do that, we can sort by the number of total customers, and we see that Philadelphia and Washington DC are the top markets where we don't have any stores right now, but where we could potentially open a new store and get the better return of our investments because they're the most number of customers there. Another way to see that same information is in a scatter plot. So here we have the consumers per store before and after. So before is with the current number of stores, and after is assuming we open a store. So we see the drop in consumers per store, and we also see the index of that specific DMA. And we see that the one that has the highest level here is Sacramento, and if we open a second store here, it drops to this level, which is still pretty high compared to the consumers per store of all the other markets. So again, if we wanted to open a store in a current market, Sacramento would be the best place. But because we want to open a store in a new market, Then we see that the customers per store for Philadelphia and Washington, D.C. are the best ones, as we saw in the previous chart. So we can see it in a scatter plot. Atlanta is also a distant third, but Philadelphia and Washington are the first ones. They're both doing great, and because the Tableau conference is here in Washington, D.C., I'm going to do the analysis for Washington, D.C., and determine where in Washington do we want to open that specific store. So the methodology that we use here is called site scanning, and what we do is we create a dummy store every certain distance, and we calculate the index for that specific location using the methodology that we showed you before. So here we have the Washington D.C. area, and the methodology is doing a site scanning of all the different potential locations to the store. So we see here towards the north west, the indexes are pretty low. Those are not great locations to open a store. But what we can do is look at different areas and do a whole site scanning of the Washington D.C. market, and we can create a heat map to what we see here. So we see that the best area is going to be here, around closer to downtown. But then we can start also filtering out and looking at the places that have a higher index, a little bit clearer. So here we are now only seeing the parts that have an index of more than 107. We can continue on until we can determine that the best location to open a store is gonna be here. Around this side of town. So we would open the store around this area because that's where most of the good places to open a store for this specific product are. But there's also a lot of other considerations that need to be taken in place. Are there competitors around? Is there good access to highways? A good location would be close to a mall or something like that. So there's other criteria that need to be included in the site selection. But from a consumer standpoint, this methodology is very clear to help us pinpoint the best location in the city for a product like the one we want to open here. So now let's shift gears and move to the next topic, which is doing market basket analysis. So in order to do market basket analysis, we need sales data, the transactional level of detail. So here we have sample data from a cafeteria that sells like sandwiches and burgers and coffee and soda. And we have exactly what are the products that are sold in each transaction. So here we see transaction 7652 sold a bottle of soda and a coffee, and we can see exactly what are the different products that are sold in each transaction, as well as the quantity, the price, and the total dollars. So we need the transactional data in order to do the market basket analysis. So when we chart a scatter plot between the number of items and the dollars, we can see the different types of transactions that exist. The biggest one here is one for $98 that had 18 items, and we can actually see what those items were. The person bought quite a lot, but most of the transactions happen around here with only 2 items, and we can see these one had bottled soda and chips, and these one have a bottle of iced tea and hot dogs and so forth. So we can see all the different transactions and what people purchased, and here we can see a histogram of the frequency of the transactions. So the most common frequency is buying 2 items at the same time. Buying 1 is also pretty common. Buying 3 and 4 is also common, but once you get to 5 or 6 or more, it's not as common as well. So most of the analysis is going to be focused on people that buy 2 or 3 items at the same time. So now we look at the number of bundles and what was sold the most number of occasions. And in order to do this, we need a special software that has the market basket analysis algorithm embedded in it. But Tableau is a great way to present the results from running some of those algorithms. So here we have the number of occasions in that specific time period, and then the overall value of the value of the bundle. So we see that the number 1 item was buying a bottle of water and coffee, and it happened 48 times during the night. But the overall highest value of the bundle was buying fries and burger, and it happened 29 times, and there were $385 in total for that specific item. And we want to look at the 3 size bundles, which are the darker circles. The number 1 was buying fries, burgers, and bottled soda. So we can see exactly what each of those 3-piece bundles were, and the relative importance in terms of the overall value of the bundle and how many times did it happen. So another step in the process is looking at the different recommendations. So for this one, we also need a market basket analysis software or statistical package that provides the algorithm. But it's pretty cool because it tells us if somebody buys this product, then what would you recommend that person buying as well. So here, if somebody, for example, buys fries, it's a good recommendation from the person to offer you burgers. If somebody buys a turkey or a roast beef or a chicken sandwich, then it's good to recommend the person a bottled soda. And we see all the different combinations that happen here. We see what is the overall value of the link sales. So people that bought fries and then would be recommended to buy burgers, that's the total amount. And then what's the percentage of the link sales? So 58% of the people that bought fries also bought burgers. So here it's pretty intuitive because the information where most of all are very familiar with burgers and fries and sandwiches and sodas. But imagine the same methodology applied to thousands and thousands of products in a retail store, where sometimes the combinations and the associations are not as intuitive. You can apply the same algorithm, and then when people check out in the cash register, then they can be offered the recommended product, or they can be sent coupons at their home, or offered promotions once they buy one of these products, buying another one of the products later on. So that's one of the most powerful things of the market basket analysis methodology. And then we can also look at the association rules and the dependency network that gets created using this market basket analysis algorithm. So here we represent a dependency network, and we have different products. We have the main products that are healthy, which are the green ones. We have the main products, which are not that healthy, burger, burritos, and turkey. We have chips and fries, which are the yellow ones, and then we also have drinks, which are the blue ones. So it's pretty interesting to see what's the relationship of what people buy. For example, when people buy healthy dishes or a little bit more upscale, like pastrami or roast beef, most commonly they buy bottled water and they buy chips instead of fries. But when somebody buys some of the other more common foods that are not as healthy, like a burrito or a burger, they usually buy fries instead of chips, and they usually buy bottled soda instead of bottled water. Again, makes perfect sense from an intuitive standpoint because we're familiar with these products. But imagine the same methodology applied to thousands and thousands of products in a store. It's very, very powerful, because that way you can group together your promotions and your assortments and a lot of your operational ways to implement your business using these types of insights. And then here in the right, we see the importance and the probability of each of those combinations as well. So we see, for example, the most important combination is when somebody buys a burger and a soda, then it's important to offer that person some fries. So before we said only for if you buy one product, we offer them another one, but here we're doing an association with multiple products. So if somebody buys fries and a soda, offer them a burger. So it does a great job on making suggestions to what the person should buy after they buy something initially. So that's the power of market basket analysis. So now we're going to look at some of the visualizations that are very helpful for the consumer goods and retail analytics area. One of my favorite ones, it's called improving and weakening. So basically we have a scatter plot that looks at the year-to-year sales for a specific product, customer, and brand combination. So this axis shows sort of the long term, while here in the bottom axis we see sort of the short term. So over the last 4 weeks or another shorter period, what are the sales year over year? So we see that generally there's a good correlation this way. So most of the products that are doing well during a longer time period have been doing well also during the last shorter period, and the ones that have been doing bad are also doing bad. But there are some exceptions to that rule, and that's why this visualization is so powerful. Here we have the difference in sales year over year over the different weeks, and so the lines are the actual sales and the bars are the percentage difference versus that same week this year versus last year. So sometimes when you look at things for every week, it's hard to drive insights and results to see if things are up or down most of the time. In this case, they're most down, but there's going to be other cases where it's not going to be as clear. So that's why doing a trend line with the running total during that whole period is great, because that way you can see the dispersion and how things accumulate. So we see, for example, in this case, we have all the products selected as the default, and for the whole year we see that the most recent year, which is the green one, is doing worse than the previous year, which is the black one. But let's take a look at a few of the examples. When we look at like product 17, because it's in the upper right quadrant, we're expecting it to do pretty well during the longer time period and also pretty well during the last 4 weeks, and that's what we see here. But when we look at a product in this quadrant, we expect it to be doing mostly bad during the longer time period, but also bad in the last 4 weeks, and that's what we see here. Now when we look at a product here in this quadrant, we're expecting it to be doing bad in the long time period, but in the last 4 weeks it actually should have improved. Let's see if that's true or not. And that's actually what happened here with product 7 in customer 7 and brand 4. We see that over the longer time period the product has not been doing well, but the last 4 weeks, yeah, there's something that we've done differently and the product has been improving its sales tremendously. And if we look at products here in this quadrant, then we're expecting to see a product that has not been doing that has been doing really well in the year, but the last 4 weeks something is going on. The sales are not as good as they were last year, and that's exactly the case, for example, for this product 5. Over the whole year it's been doing great, but oops, something happened the last 4 years. There's something that's going wrong. And we can dive deeper into that specific product to understand what's happening and what's driving that specific behavior. So now let's look at another great visualization that can be done with Tableau, and this one is called a planogram and a planogram heatmap. So we can actually see a shelf and what are the different products that are part of that shelf, and we see that here in the top. But we can also merge that location information from the planogram with the point of sales data to understand the performance and the productivity of each of the products. So we see here, for example, that most of the products that have the highest number of sales are towards the middle of the shelf, and that's the location that's easier for customers to reach. So it makes sense that those products are the ones that are performing the better. And also sometimes the retailers place the better selling products in those better locations on purpose as well. But we see a few exceptions here. This product in the top, which is product 3, is selling pretty well. While this product here in the left, it has a pretty good location, but it's not doing as well. So maybe an option is to switch the products around. This one, switch these two, and maybe we would even get some better sales for this specific product if it gets a better location and it's not in the top of the shelf, very hard to reach. So that's one of the powerful insights that we can drive from looking at planogram heat maps and how the location and the sales of the products interact. Now, to finish, I'm going to make a few comments on based on my experience of implementing business intelligence and analytics processes and systems and organizations within consumer goods and retail companies. So basically, I think it's very important to have two different types of teams in a business intelligence and analytics organization. One of the teams should be more technical in nature, and what I like calling that team is the BI operations and support team. And then they're the ones that manage all the data and the master data. They're the ones that build the databases. They're the ones that manage the reporting and analysis tool. While the other team is more business oriented, and they're the ones that are in charge of all the change management, so doing all the training, all the amendment, doing the analytics and sharing those insights and make sure that they're applied in the organization. So something that I've seen that works really well is that both teams are aligned and ideally reporting through the same organization, and ideally the business intelligence team would all report through marketing. I've seen it embedded in the IT organization, and it's a little bit challenging in that case. So when IT interacts with the business to try to implement the insights, it's a little bit harder to implement. While if the whole team is embedded in the marketing side, then sharing those insights and working with sales and marketing people is a lot easier, and the changes are easier to adopt there. And then the other thing that's important is this team sometimes can belong to IT rather than the business side, but then they get competing priorities, and doing business intelligence and analytics for marketing and sales, it's always changing. You're always adding new things, and if this team is part of IT, it's going to be a little bit harder to free up those resources and get approval to switch your things or add new things to your processes and systems. So the website that I started, it's called Consumer Goods Analytics, and basically what triggered me to start this website is to share the knowledge of analytics with a lot of people. The harder things is not doing the database and the reporting. The hardest thing is the embedment and change management. You can create a great system with great tools and great reports, but if nobody's using it and driving insights and driving value out of it, you're not going to be successful. So by building my website, what I hope happens, and what has been happening, is that people learn these methodologies. And when people learn the methodologies and start applying them, then other companies and retailers start learning about them and start applying things. So now when you take one of these methodologies that I showed today to, for example, your buyer at a retailer, there's a better chance for that person to implement the changes if they see it coming not only from you but also from from his other clients. So that's why change management is so important, as we all work together to implement all these methodologies, then we're going to have a much better chance to be successful and implement business intelligence and analytics in the consumer goods area. So I invite you to go to my website. There's a lot of great articles and case studies and other examples of advanced visualizations there, and you can learn also other things on how to apply analytics in the consumer goods and retail area. And that's all for today. Thanks a lot.